Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the participants who have joined us from across the world for the IWA webinar titled Inspiring the Next Wave of Water Stewards, Introducing the AWS Standard V3.0. So without further ado, I would like to give basic webinar information and the housekeeping rules for our participants. So this webinar will be recorded and made available on demand on the IWA Connect Plus platform and the IWA website with relevant information. The speakers are responsible for securing copyright permissions for any work that they will present during the webinar. And the opinions, hypotheses, conclusions, or recommendations contained in the presentations are the sole responsibility of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect IWA opinion. For the participants, I would like to mention that you can use the chat box to introduce yourself and to use it for general activities, while I would urge all the participants to pose their questions in the Q&A box during the webinar. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Faith Lawrence from AWS to take the webinar forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Afia, and welcome everybody on behalf of IWA and the Alliance for Water Stewardship. We will have before we start and before I introduce the agenda, we have two poll questions, and Afia will beam them up so that you could help us just understand where you are on your water stewardship journey. That will be featured on your screen as we speak. Our agenda today is going to be a shared one. I want to introduce the contributions. We will have, I will speak a little bit about the AWS and the IWA MOU to advance water stewardship. And then we'll have Tyler Farrell, who is the AWS Standards Manager, speak a bit about the new AWS Standard version 3.0 and share what the changes are, what the spirit of the new standard is, and how that might impact and strengthen how we advance water stewardship. And then we will have Oliver Manica, whom you know. He's an IWA member and also a Global Advisory Alliance Regional Secretary. Oliver has also had the privilege of co-chairing the AWS Technical Committee, so he also has very much technical inside information on the new standard and the use of the standard. And so we're looking forward to his reflections on that as well. I am Faith Lawrence. I head up the policy engagement and the strategic partnerships portfolio for AWS. And it's my very great pleasure then to kick us off to share a little bit around what the spirit of the partnership is. We have two poll questions. Thank you so much. We'll refer to them in the next short while. But maybe I will then just, without further ado, share with you, what we have in mind for our webinar today. Afia, I think I'm going to start off with maybe saying after we do the presentation, I will also, after Tyler does his presentation and Oliver, we will then have a panel discussion, and hopefully if you have any questions on the presentations and specifically around the new version of the AWS standard, please can you put them in the Q&A, and then hopefully we will use that to guide our moderated discussion, and then we'll have closing remarks, and hopefully that will give us a bit of an idea of where we want to go after this collaboration. So to start us off, Afia is going to start sharing the screen. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the spirit of our MOU. Afia, could you go to the next slide? Have you got the results already of the Q&A? Afia?
While you were speaking.
Is it still coming in? Okay, I'll refer to them later on.
Sure.
Well, maybe I just start the conversation and we can come back to it. So I want to share with you just a brief background to the partnership that we have with IWA. I'm just controlling the slides. The spirit of it is to really collaborate and expand on both our organization's objectives. We have complementary missions and overlapping members. Many of you are members of, or your organizations are members of AWS, and of course, vice versa. And for us, it's really about a shared interest in contributing to water management and the promotion of action on water stewardship globally. And that is really the guiding force behind our partnership. And from AWS's side, we're very pleased to be partnering with IWA on advancing water stewardship objectives through both organizations and our work. So it's about expressing joint objectives, but also enabling and encouraging joint activities such as the one we have today. Examples of that would be contributions to the World Water Congress, your World Water Congress. I know there's one happening this year. We also have our annual Global Water Stewardship Forum taking place in June. We have the possibilities for joint capacity and knowledge sharing across our networks, our very diverse networks. But also the intention is to also bring knowledge about the experience and the use of AWS, the AWS standard, and the lessons coming out of the watershed management work of IWA members, and to try and find common ground, whether it's on reuse or advancing water resilience or applying the standard to create a more credible approach to how water sustainability topics are being addressed at watershed management levels. I would also know that you have specialist groups covering a host of themes and around technical urban water related issues. And the intention is to try and find strategic touch points and specific collaboration really around that. The next slide, please. So just to start us, if you can move us to the next slide, that'd be great. Just to start us off, I thought I'd put up the slide just to contextualize, and this is nothing new to all of you, that water is a business risk. And not only is it a business risk that is urgent, that is pressing, but we've seen the impact of climate change, the impact of floods, of droughts, and various other forms of challenges impacting very much on business and business as usual. And this particular concept of business risk, I just put up a few images that we all very much aware of, that it's hitting industry and it's affecting industry on a number of different levels. So it's impacting on continuity, on operational continuity, whether it's from water quality related topics or issues, or water supply, or even topics relating to WASH. The topic of operational continuity and risk and the impact that this is having on business as a whole is something that has been seen to be quite critical. On the other side, we also have the social license to operate risks that companies are facing. And this is very much linked to the perceptions of the use of water, the impact of corporate usage of water on others, and the relationship that this has, or the perceptions that this has from a public regulator perspective, or from a community perspective, or a brand perspective, or a supply chain issue. This social license to operate risk is something that is really very much informing the kind of responses that businesses are coming up with regard to water. So water stewardship is seen as a response to this risk. If we can get the next slide. I think I think it's a good moment then for us to look at how are we defining water stewardship? And at the AWS, our mission is to ignite and nurture global and local leadership in credible water stewardship. And for us, we see water stewardship as the use of water that is socially and culturally equitable, environmentally sustainable, and economically beneficial, achieved through a stakeholder inclusive process that involves site and catchment-based actions. And I think the emphasis of stakeholder inclusive is very important for us. The whole idea that it is about a organizational, multi-stakeholder collaboration, and it's about acting collectively around shared water challenges in this. Our organization, if we go to the next slide, is really therefore a membership alliance made up of stakeholders across the globe who are concerned and have an interest and a strategic contribution to make around best practice in water stewardship. We have 240 plus members covering multinational corporations, international NGOs, consultancies, but also civil society organizations and the public sector. And I know many of the people on this call might be officials working in the public sector, guiding different water resources management functions. Our alliance very much speak to some of the water-related stewardship challenges that you might be facing in those different functions, whether you come from a company perspective or a public sector or civil society perspective. Besides being a membership alliance, we are also a standard system, and we are very pleased and very proud that we're the custodian of a global best practice standard known as the AWS standard. And today's webinar is going to be really about unpacking what this new standard version 3.0 is about, and how through the refinements and this global stakeholder consultation process, we've managed to come up with a standard that speaks to the pressing needs of guiding a credible water stewardship journey and providing the framework within which to view that contribution. In addition to having been the custodian of the AWS standard, we also provide training, events, capacity building, and of course, certification against the standard. But we're also a convener and a catalyst. And one of the tasks that I'm doing, or we're doing together with you today, is about also sharing our water stewardship message, but also convening and contributing to global and local conversations on the practice of water stewardship. It's also about catalyzing place-based collective action. I emphasized the collective aspect of our work earlier, but also collaborating with different stakeholders on diverse organizational or water security or water thematic topics. And I think the beautiful part of our MOU and our relationship with IWA is that it allows us to start the conversation, whether it's on reuse, whether it's on looking at regulatory anchoring voluntary standards like the AWS standard in a regulatory standards norm conversation. There are different, as examples, there are different points of entry for that collaboration as a convener and as a catalyst. I was going to say catalyst. Maybe finally, I mentioned earlier on to you that we also, if we go to the next slide, I mentioned to you that we all, of course, seek to advance dialogue and collaboration, but we're also mindful that water stewardship doesn't happen in a vacuum. And the work that is happening on the ground is influenced by policies, by standards and governance frameworks. And for us, it's about trying to elevate the experience experience of our members who are applying and giving effect to good water stewardship leadership on the ground. It's about encatchments and insights, and it's about elevating those conversations into meaningful engagement around policy and around credible water stewardship and what that might mean. And this takes place at different levels. Maybe globally, the conversation is around how water stewardship relates to reuse. And how do we advance collective action, for example, and how do we advance insights from collective action on the ground or at site and catchment level in the places where water stewardship is taking place, and how do we elevate those lessons into national conversations. And that part of our work is emerging, is growing, and we're very excited that we have this opportunity to partner with IWA and with you to also draw out some of those lessons and insights and to feed that into our dialogues and conversations around governance processes. So by way of introduction, that is us. I want to now ask Tyler to talk to us a little bit about the new International Water Stewardship Standard version 3.0 and to share with you all the changes and all the exciting insights that's come from that. So over to you, Tyler.
Great. Thanks, Faith, and hi, everybody. My name's Tyler Farrow. I'm the Standards Manager with the Alliance for Water Stewardship. Really great to be here today. I was just scanning the list of participants for any familiar names. I only found one, Lindsay Shan. So hello, Lindsay. Otherwise, it's a very new audience for me, so I'm very pleased to be here. So I'm going to speak about the Alliance for Water Stewardship Standard, our new version 3.0, and give you really kind of an overview of the changes. Can we have the next slide, please? So we recently undertook, over the last couple of years, a review and revision of the Alliance for Water Stewardship Standard. So the standard was originally released back in 2014. So we've had just over a decade of implementation. The second version was released in 2019, and then we started undertaking this revision approximately 2 years ago. So it's considered best practice within the standards community to do a review and potential revision every 5 years to ensure the standard remains current and up to date. After doing a review, we made the decision to undertake a major revision of the standard. So our aims for doing so were really kind of threefold. The first was practicality, so creating a streamlined version of the standard for companies to be able to implement cost effectively at scale. Utility, which is about aligning with wider sustainability agendas and priorities such as climate change and biodiversity. And value is about strengthening our integration with corporate level reporting. In terms of the kind of governance and decision making for the process, we followed ISEAL's Code of Good Practice. We are an ISEAL code compliant member. Essentially, ISEAL is a body that essentially determines kind of best practice and a code of best practice for standard systems like ourselves. It was our AWS technical committee that had overall responsibility for the process, and our members who ultimately voted to adopt version 3 of the standard. Next slide, please. Oh, I might actually have control of the slides. I don't. Okay. So there's a bit of a lag on the slides. So in terms of the framework of the standard, this has largely stayed the same from the second version to the third. So for those who are unfamiliar, the standard essentially is a framework for implementing water stewardship within a site and a catchment. It's built around 5 steps, which are gather and understand, commit and plan, implement, evaluate, and communicate and disclose. And these are all meant to essentially drive a process of continual improvement. So it's not that you finish implementing the standard and you're done. It's an ongoing process of maintenance and of continual improvement. So that has remained the same in version 3. And the standard is intended to achieve 5 outcomes. These are good water governance, sustainable water balance, good water quality status, healthy freshwater ecosystems and biodiversity, and safe water sanitation and hygiene for all. So these 4 of the 5 outcomes have remained the same. That the fourth one there, healthy freshwater ecosystems and biodiversity, that was a change within the revision process, and I'll speak a little bit more about that. I'll also just draw your attention to the QR code on the screen there where you can download a copy of the standard. See if I can advance the slide myself. There we go. So I'll give a overview of the major changes to version 3. There's the document available for download as well on our website, which gives a detailed breakdown of kind of requirement by requirement what's changed. But I'll give you the kind of the highlights. So around practicality, as I mentioned, we've streamlined the requirements of the standards. So I think we've reduced the requirements by about 25%. There's now 76 requirements in the standard. And we did so in a way to really retain the comprehensiveness and the rigor of the standard while removing kind of redundancy and low value requirements within the standard. In terms of accessibility, we've adjusted the balance between the core, the gold, and platinum requirements within the standard to essentially make the standard more accessible for those who are getting started and who want to get certified at the core level, but then also providing a roadmap for continual improvement at the higher levels at gold and platinum. One of the big aims, I think, for this whole process was improving the auditability of the standard. We have done a lot of work to set kind of clear minimum expectations for conformance, which really reduces room for interpretation. So, what we want to avoid is, an auditor and a site interpreting an aspect of the standard differently, that leading to some sort of kind of friction or disagreement within the audit process. So we want to set very clear minimum expectations in terms of what's needed to conform with the various requirements in the standard. And then lastly, as I mentioned or alluded to, was the enhanced approach to advanced certification. So we have now a smaller, more focused set of advanced requirements at the gold and platinum level. These build logically on what's there within the core requirements to provide a pathway for continual improvement. So, our hope that as a site matures over time, they may go from core to gold to platinum during their recertification process. In terms of utility, there were some very, I think, quite significant changes here. When we polled essentially our members and stakeholders in terms of priorities for this revision, climate and resilience came out as a top priority. So we've included new requirements within the standard to understand climate trends, water-related impacts, and to identify climate risks and climate-proof water stewardship plans, which I think is integral given the interlinkages between water and climate. Similarly, for biodiversity, we've changed what used to be the important water-related areas outcome to healthy freshwater ecosystem biodiversity. We now have a number of revised requirements, essentially for sites to understand, what are the kind of important ecosystems, biodiversity hotspots within at their site itself and within the broader catchment, and to implement actions to protect, to conserve, and restore them. Collective action was also a real big priority for this revision process. I think over the last several years, there's been growing consensus in the water stewardship community that companies and sites can't really achieve the scale of impact they need to on their own. That we need to work collectively in catchments around the world to have the sort of scale of change that we need. So collective action is now featured within the core, the gold and platinum levels of the standard. And then finally, desalination reuse. We want to make sure that this version of the standard is equally applicable to sites that use desalinated water. And we also want to revise the requirements in a way to recognize and encourage water reuse where it's appropriate and feasible. So finally, is value. One addition here to the standard is we've added some requirements related to identifying water-related impacts and dependencies. And this really serves as a precursor to identifying risks and opportunities. So we've incorporated this idea of double materiality into the standard and really informs kind of, I think, the rigor of the site's water stewardship plan. And then another priority for us was ensuring that the standard provides value for those who are reporting at a corporate level. So version 3 of the standard is highly interoperable with the new CSRD, which is Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, corporate level reporting, particularly their E3 water standards. So the information that's gathered by the site during the course of implementing the AWS standard can feed in directly to almost all of the reporting indicators for that E3 standard. And we're going to be developing some guidance to help companies and their sites to aggregate information and report it at a corporate level for that E3 standard. So in terms of, I'd say kind of next steps and where we go from here. So the AWS standard guidance is in the final stages of review. It's set to be released really within, I think, the next couple of days. That's something that a number of our members and stakeholders have been eagerly awaiting. So the guidance really supports the implementation and the interpretation of the standard, and it goes through requirement by requirement to really clarify, the aim of each requirement, how to implement, gives references, examples, templates in some cases. I think it's a really integral document to our system and supports use of the standard. We've also updated our AWS standard system training. So the course has now been fully updated to version 3 of the standard. There's a number of upcoming courses within our calendar that people can register for if they want to visit the website or contact training at a4ws.org for more information and support. And audits against the version 3 standard are going to be commencing in June of this year, which is very exciting. So from launching the standard, it was officially launched on the 18th of March. There's a 1-year transition period. So the idea is that after that 1 year, all of the initial or recertification audits are going to be conducted against version 3. During that 1-year period, those who are going for their initial certification or recertification will have a choice of using version 2 or version 3, depending on where they're at in terms of their preparation. But it's worth just clarifying that every site that's currently certified to version 2 will have their surveillance audits conducted against version 2. Sorry, the slight lag on the slides. So yeah, that's the really a rapid overview of version 3 of the standard. Really happy to hear questions as we get to the Q&A section of the webinar. But just want to provide some information here about obviously download the standard. Our AWS forum is happening next month. I believe it's full in terms of registration, but there is a wait list going. And also would encourage people to keep in touch, follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to the newsletter. That's where we make all of the announcements about the standard, about the guidance, but also all other aspects of our system. Thank you very much. I think I'll now turn it back over to Faith.
Thank you very much, Tyler. Thanks for that comprehensive background. There's just two, before we move on to Oliver, I thought it might be helpful for you to explain. You mentioned the surveillance audit, and I thought just for those who don't know what that is, if you could just explain what a surveillance audit is, that'd be most helpful.
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, our certificates are run on essentially a 3-year cycle. So when a site becomes certified, that certificate is valid for 3 years. During the course of the 3 years, there's 2 surveillance audits. Essentially, it's like an annual thing. Surveillance audits are typically lighter touch. They don't go into every single requirement of the standard. They're more about kind of reviewing what's been done, progress against the site's water stewardship plan. They can be, in many cases, they can be done remotely. But the idea is really about, reviewing progress, maintaining certification, and then at the end of 3 years, a site would then go for a recertification audit against the standard, and then they'd be audited against the full requirements again.
Thanks, Tyler. That's helpful. I'm now going to ask our next speaker, Oliver, to share with us a few reflections on on his experience with the standard. And we have with us someone who's not only the founding advisor for the Global Advisory Alliance, connected to IWA, but also formerly on the the technical committee of the AWS. And so, Oliver, very great that you participated in our webinar today. Maybe you could just have a few reflections with everybody through the lens of your different roles. I think that would be very helpful. Thank you, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you, Faith and Tyler, for the introduction of the Alliance for Water Stewardship, but also the next iteration of the standard, and also thank you, Afia, for hosting us here today. And it has been a great experience and opportunity for me to work together with the Alliance for Water Stewardship over many years. I probably first started working with the Alliance back in 2012 when the first standard was like in the development. So I have seen kind of a lot of the development of the standard itself, and it has come a very long way. And I mean, one aspect of water stewardship is collective action, and I think this is really kind of the very important element. We are all water practitioners of all different sorts of specialties within the IWA, as well as in maybe those who join us from outside. But I think water stewardship, or at least for me, it has been some sort of a mantra that has been developed through all my professional career, and that has helped to focus on a particular topic when you had to and go all the way into a very technical detail. But it also allows you to see the landscape around water and the sustainable management of water and approach water level, helping us to think about the different stakeholders that are being involved, like all the way from the governance level, all the way down to those water users in the communities that our factory or business or our water sector organization is active in. So maybe we can go to the next slide. I just wanted to quickly get one step back. So I have been with IWA for many years. I'm sure there are others who have been there longer, but so I joined back in 2018, 2019, and I joined the specialist group Sustainability in the Water Sector. Our current chair is Miriam Feierberg, based in Denmark. And when I look at the working groups that we have developed over the years, but also the activities that we have been hosting specifically through our specialist group, but also in collaboration with the network more broadly, I think we kind of well fit into the water stewardship thinking. And we made sure 6 years ago when we had a conference back in Guayaquil together with the Inter-American Development Bank to have quite a large segment that brought together water stewardship practitioners from Latin America to Ecuador, but also those organizations that were in the process of further shaping and pushing the Alliance for Water Stewardship. There were both AWS, but also various NGOs there, various business networks that work closely on the sustainable management of water. And then out of that, we were able to curate various contents that are also free available through, for example, IWA Publishing, where we have an accessible book. I think there's a second volume coming up shortly, led by Cheryl Davis, around the sustainable industrial water use, which brings multiple perspectives together, both from the finance sector, from the utility sector, from the NGO world, from the governance sector more broadly. So it's quite an interesting piece because obviously we're all sitting in different organizations and we have different kind of focus areas. Some maybe focus more on water quality, others more on water quantity, others maybe feeling more far removed because they're working on governance structures more broadly. But I think the standard is kind of a conduit between those different topics that work quite well. So what I also wanted to mention, I think IWA already has a lot of different frameworks in place. I remember when I joined the Water by Cities framework, was available. The discussion through the EU on a circular economy was emerging back, or started really in 2015 and got operationalized, and where we looked at the different frameworks and tried to see how we can integrate water stewardship. So, and also Tyler has mentioned that we want to, or like the standard had to be interoperable, what a word, between the emerging disclosure standards. So it's kind of it's an interesting topic because obviously you have different influences, different ways of thinking about how water should be talked about, how water should be reported in. And everyone often has, I'm sure everyone has heard about the framework fatigue. So sometimes it's good to step a way back, and that's what happened when we worked together with companies who were interested in sustainable water management, but said we signed up for like 10 different frameworks. We have like all those different pledges. We also have pledges on biodiversity as well as on climate mitigation. So we kind of stepped a step back and try to map out how actually all those different standards overlap, and also how the language would work. So maybe the next slide, please. I don't want you to read all of those different elements necessarily. But I think this graphic kind of showcases quite well how water stewardship as a way of thinking, but also the standard specifically brings together quite a couple of different frameworks, work requirements, but also some of the buzzwords, I guess, to help you to understand the space a little better. And often when you look into the different frameworks in the ESG investor reporting world, also in the corporate sustainability reporting world, when you look into the fine print, what you should actually use to get down into the water stewardship world, there's often a link referring back to the standard. And as we have heard, it's quite a rigorous and was part of this iteration of the standard, but also I came into the technical committee just at the end of version 2. So there's quite a lot of discussion, lots of controversies that have to be worked through to align on the language that's being used, and to make sure that there is still a connection between all those different other frameworks that are existing out there, because that brings you that quite strong linkage. And when you work, if it's like in supply chain engagement, if you talk about the standard, you can kind of easily link up with other topics, like if it's in the disclosure world, but also if you want to introduce new topics around, for example, biodiversity and climate. So basically where it all comes down to, I mean, you might be part of one certain element of water stewardship. So I think like looking at what the Alliance for Water Stewardship does, but also what the standard outlines for everyone, it kind of gives you like a more holistic picture about the different topics that are considered very important by the various stakeholders that were consulted to basically develop and validate this particular standard. And then this kind of helps you to focus specifically on your part. But if you need to connect your work with another part and you're not a specialist in it, there's still like a pathway to use, for example, the standard to link up to other frameworks and to other specialists, but also to other communities of practice. Because as we have seen by Tyler's presentation, for example, or also from Faith, there's a whole network of members that are actually practitioners that have applied the standards within their portfolios, but also others that can provide you information, like, for example, the IWA community. We have so many specialist groups that you can link to, and you find a common language. So I guess concluding here, it's I think the message to all of us in the call for action is have look at the standard, especially for those who are not so familiar with it, and see have a read and see what you get out of that. I think feedback is always very welcome from various parts of the water world, I would say. But also the second point is you're kind of not starting from scratch. If you think about how do I do my water management, or how do I get my water management practices more sustainable, there's already a framework out there that is like a good starting point, which then also can connect you to further frameworks, but aligns within the language that's being used, because that's often kind of the hard way. There's too many frameworks, but the AWS standard is like a good starting point in my perspective. Yeah, so just a couple of reflections from my end, and yeah, thank you, Faith and Tyler, for inviting me along to talk a little bit about my experience with the standard.
Thank you very much, Oliver. I think that was very, very rich. We have one question in the chat, but before we take that question, I've noted, Prashanto, I've noted your comment. So I'll come to that in a minute, but maybe just to Oliver, if I can just kick off our conversation now. Just for the sake of the people on the call, maybe you can share with us who made up the technical committee that you were part of. Was it just one sector? Was there, how was the technical committee balanced? Maybe that would be quite helpful for the group, just so that people can see that there were different perspectives that shaped and framed the new standard version. And then maybe Tyler could add on the extent of the feedback that they received in the consultation process, maybe the number of comments that you received as you were busy refining the new standard. So, Oliver, maybe you can start.
Yeah, Tyler, you can correct me if I represented wrongly, but yes, I mean the important element across, I guess, the whole of AWS, but also the standard committees, was that there's a balanced representation of kind of the three main sectors. So on the one side, we have civil society, we have the public, but also the private sector. And yeah, we've like, I still say we because like water stewardship is in my heart. So it's like important. Often you can find those examples that governments work with companies, but then the civil society is being left out. Sometimes it's the other way around, and then the private sector feels excluded from the discussion. It's very important to yeah, it's basically, and it's part of the standard. It's not possible to really exclude certain parts of the groups because you might not get the right feedback. So it's often it provides you with a very rich discussion, obviously, because you have different members from all over the world actually, and the technical committee was had members from all over the place to ensure that there's this diversity in the room, and to bring perspectives from all over the world, but also from those different sectors as well. And the same goes for the review. Is often very important to understand what type of feedback also comes from which type of sector group, to be able to digest the feedback.
Thank you, Oliver. Maybe Tyler, just on the there's now 3 questions coming through. I'm noting them. Maybe you can say something about the extent of feedback you received as you were busy revising the standard.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I would just add to the technical committee part first. I think, yeah, Oliver, you explained it well. It's the members of the technical committee are elected by the AWS membership, and it's balanced between those 3 sectors that Oliver mentioned. It's a 12-person committee with 4 people in each chamber. In terms of the public, the feedback received, so we had 2 rounds of public consultation on the standards. So essentially, we developed a first draft of version 3 and opened that up to public consultation. In that first round, we received over 2,000 comments, I think, from about roughly about 100 people. So we had a whole process of essentially going through those comments, addressing them, reaching kind of a point where we felt like, well, what were the main substantive pieces of feedback? What was kind of the consensus? So it's really a balancing act of essentially addressing feedback and coming up with a standard that really I think is acceptable for everyone. We then developed a second draft, which went to public consultation, and in that second round, I think we had about 1,200 comments from maybe about 87, 90 different individuals. So again, a pretty rigorous process of addressing a comment disposition on all that. And we released, you can find on the website, summaries of the public consultations in terms of who we heard from, what were the prevailing areas of feedback that we heard, and how those were addressed in subsequent revisions to what was now finally the final version.
Great, thanks, Tyler and Oliver. I'm going to go through the questions now. I'm going to start with Pinaki's question. She asks, or Pinaki asks, what are the driving forces for entities to undergo water stewardship certifications? Tyler, maybe you want to respond to that? Why would a company
Sure.
want to get certification against the standard?
Yeah, we see all sorts of different, I think, motivations to undertake certification. I guess backing up a little bit is the reason that we exist was, I think, in the last kind of decade or a little bit longer, there was a lot more attention to water from the private sector, a lot of emerging initiatives and frameworks and tools, but there wasn't really any sort of one agreed standard for what constitutes good water stewardship. And that's really why we came about, was to have one universal kind of agreed framework for what it means to be a good water steward. So I would say the standard really was the closest thing that we have to consensus on what it means to be a good water steward. In terms of adopters of the standard, there's different drivers. I think many like to use the standard as a framework for their own internal water management, to identify, to manage risks within their sites. I think it's a useful framework for sites and staff to really get a handle on water within their operations. Others will be driven by more so kind of reputational concerns, especially companies that maybe have had some sort of questions or press in the past around their water use. They essentially like to demonstrate to consumers, to investors, that they are doing the right thing and that they're being responsible when it comes to their water management. Others really, I think, sometimes it becomes more of a norm within a sector. So we see that, say, perhaps in drinks or food and beverage, where maybe one leading company will kind of set the bar in terms of, we're going to become certified, and that can then influence peers within the sector. So you see a number of different reasons. I'm not sure if Oliver, if you want to add to that at all from your experience.
No, I think you laid it out quite well. So no additional ones from my end.
All right.
Okay, great. There was another question around working groups, and I think the question is really around are there working groups? What are the working groups? Are they linked to climate change? Is Bangladesh featured in any way? Women in water? Maybe if you don't mind, I quickly kick that off. I respond on that. We have what we call communities of practice at AWS, and we have five communities of practice, and then also a policy engagement group that we host. For the communities of practice, Tyler, you can correct me. We've got the agriculture value chain, we've got the farmer, chem, and personal care community of practice. There's a textile and apparel, there's a cross-sectoral one, and then one on biodiversity. So at the moment, we don't have a woman in water or one specifically on climate change, but the topics of climate change comes in through our policy dialogue conversations, and of course it features in some of the themes and presentations that comes through in the communities of practice. But Mukta, we would be very happy for you to consult with you. You could consult with us afterwards, and we can give you more information on those communities of practice. It is also on our website, so feel free to consult the website for that. There is another question around how the standards are relevant for private companies working in water management ecosystems in India. And the question is around how do you leverage the standard and convince government stakeholders in the private sectors to follow them? And I think maybe, Oliver, I'm going to ask you, just from your experience consulting and using the standard, how have you convinced the private sector to adopt the standard and use it as a framework for their water stewardship journey?
Yeah, I guess mostly when you work with the private sector, there's already a particular drive where they see they want to implement the standard. But I think like the standard and water stewardship as a framework more broadly, together with some initiatives of NGOs as well, provides quite a good framework to prepare you to also speak to like the governance sectors, but also ensure you talk to all the different relevant stakeholder groups amongst them, because usually companies already have some sort of a stakeholder relationship, and it helps you kind of to start framing it more. There's quite a lot of let's say evidence-based and practitioner evidence out there around water stewardship and what value it has added, and there's a lot of that can be found also on the AWS homepage. But then I remember back in the day when I was working, for example, with WWF, yeah, there it was about talking to companies and getting them like into the thinking, and obviously you not always run through the door with talking about water and sustainability. You frame it around what you mentioned at the beginning. It's a risk to your business. You don't want to have a stranded asset. Certain parts of the world, especially with progressing climate change, will have stronger issues around flooding, heat, all sorts of the different aspects that you can think that are linked to water. So it's about this making this narrative better understood, but then link it back to those causes, because often people think about like physical water risk, but there's so much more. It's not just the physical risk, it's about how water is governed, and that kind of gives you then the handles to speak about that topic.
Thank you. There's one question or comment. We have to move to close our webinar, unfortunately, but there's one comment Ilana just put in the chat that I think might be important to pick up. And Tyler, this is maybe something you can reflect on, how with all the changes happening, and Ilana mentions the shift in the CSRD work around water resilience. How is the topic of water resilience featured in the standard? And I think maybe you can just quickly just share some thoughts on that before we move to conclude.
Well, yeah, I think as I mentioned, we've really made the linkages to climate resilience much more explicit in this version of the standard. I think it featured, I think, kind of passingly in version 2 of the standard, but I think the main difference here is about kind of incorporating climate data and having understanding of climate data and trends within your given catchment. So any sort of adaptive actions, or actions towards resilience need to be based on an understanding of what are the observed and predicted changes to climate to ensure that you're not kind of having any sort of maladaptation. So we kind of baked in climate resilience through that in the gathering of that climate data as part of step 1 of the standard, and that then informs your planning and ensuring that you're kind of coming up with a water stewardship plan that's responsive to those climate risks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Good. And I think we are moving to conclude our discussion. I'm going to ask, we have I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat, but what we'll do is we'll keep a record of it, and of course we'll respond as best we can. I'm going to ask Afia if she could move to share the last information slots that we have on upcoming IWA events, and then we'll move to conclude.
Yes, thank you both the speakers, and thank you, Faith, for a wonderful session. So, and thank you to the participants, for their excellent engagement during the webinar and for posing their questions. So just before concluding, I would just like to mention the upcoming webinars and events by IWA. So our next webinar is about shaping confidence for women in the water sector, scheduled for 2nd June. And you can explore it through the QR code. Then we have the next webinars for all the young water professionals, Career Skills Session 5, Bridge the Gap Between Academy and Industry at June 5th. Then next week, we have one of our flagship conferences, IWA LED Leading Edge Conference happening in Houston, Texas from 1 to 5th June. So I would request everybody to attend. And then we have the World Water Congress and Exhibition in Glasgow during October, and the early bird registrations are still open till June end. So I would encourage all to visit the page. Then we have our Digital Water Summit in November from 24 to 26 in Istanbul. And now to all the participants who are not members of IWA, so there's a good news that we provide 20% discount off our membership. So if you can scan the QR code and use the discount code here, you can get the discount off. So I would encourage all to explore the IWA and the numerous opportunities. Thank you, everyone. Back to you, Faith.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe just
Thank
to
you.
conclude,
Take care.
we hope we inspired you to be good water stewards. And please feel free to contact us via the AWS website and the links provided. And a very big thanks to the IWA for the partnership. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all, everyone.